I sat there in the cold Vermont rental house, in the middle of a gloomy winter day. The only light was from an old desk lamp. My stomach growled with hunger. Then the door opened. "Dad, why isn't there anything to eat?" My daughter, Heather, dropped her Chanel handbag on the floor, her voice full of annoyance. "You get $8,000 a month in retirement. Where does it all go?" Before I could answer, Ryan walked in. He was wearing an expensive North Face jacket, looking at me with contempt. "She's right, Bob," Ryan smirked. He walked straight in front of me, his Rolex shining. He announced smugly, as if taking away a child's toy. "Every dollar he gets is under my control. That $8,000 isn't yours. It's family property, and you're not allowed to touch it." Heather froze. She looked at me, then at Ryan. Without a word, my daughter took off her small diamond earrings, placed them on the table, and did something that left Ryan speechless. I'm guessing 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it where you are? And where are you listening? I sat there in the dark living room, where the cold of the Vermont countryside had seeped into the wood. The first snow was falling, thin as a mourning scarf, over the withered grass. The old gas heater hissed weakly, unable to dispel the bitter cold outside or inside me. At 62, I was Bob Miller, a former mechanic, a veteran, and now a shadow of myself. I had lost my wife, Sarah, 5 years earlier. Since the accident at the machine shop that injured my back and forced me to retire early, I had become an invisible man. My job was manual labor, a technical mind. Now, my mind was sharp, but my hands shook, and my aching back was a constant reminder of my disability. But I had $8,000. $8,000 a month in pension and Social Security. A lot of money to live comfortably in this small town. It was a legacy of perseverance, a reward for years of repairing car engines for the whole neighborhood, including Ford F-150s with hundreds of thousands of miles on them. Sarah always appreciated that. She always said, "Bob, you're a pillar. Your old toolbox is worth more than a college degree." I looked across the room, the rusty metal toolbox sitting there like a memorial. Tears stung my eyes as I remembered Sarah. Sarah. She used to love the way I came home covered in grease. She would bake apple pie with a crispy crust and a fragrant cinnamon scent, banishing the smell of engine oil. The musty, bleach-stained smell of this rental house where I lived was a cruel contrast to that memory. 6 months ago, my daughter, Heather, and son-in-law, Ryan Thorne, a self-proclaimed financial advisor, came over. Ryan, looking slick in an expensive suit, convinced me, "Dad, you need a break. Money is complicated. Let me manage your retirement account. We'll help you balance your bills." I believed them. I signed the papers. I did it because I felt like a burden. I thought, after all, they were family. And that's when I lost all power. Since then, I've been given $50 a week. $50. With $50, I have to buy groceries, over-the-counter medications, and sometimes a little Starbucks coffee to try to stay sane. $50 a week, while the other $8,000 goes somewhere else. I used to be the provider. Now I have to live off my own allowance. Today is my pension day. But I know the money won't come to me. It will be in an account I can no longer touch. The smell of apple pie has gone, leaving only the smell of mold and lies. That's the price of trust. And that's the pain, piled upon pain, of a man who has willingly surrendered his dignity to greed. Ryan's shiny black Cadillac Escalade pulled up in front of my shabby rental house. It was the most ridiculous contrast I'd ever seen in this small town. My daughter, Heather, walked in first. She looked around, sniffing, as if the musty smell of the house was a personal affront to the coach bag she was carrying. Their visits were always cold, as if I were an item on their ledger that needed to be addressed. "Dad," Heather said, her voice cold and hurried. She set a box of cheap generic brand cereal and a bottle of milk on the table. I glanced at the expiration date. Sure enough, it had expired 2 days ago. "Everything's been paid for, Dad. Stop complaining." She treated me like a spoiled child, nothing more. I tried to contain my anger, but I had a real problem. The front porch was leaking. and I was afraid it would collapse in the coming snowstorm. I offered weakly, my voice sounding pitiful. "Heather, son, I need another $100, just $100, to hire the neighbor kid to fix the porch. It's about to collapse." Ryan, who was leaning against the doorframe, his Rolex Submariner gleaming on his wrist, chuckled. A sneer, a self-satisfied laugh. "Old man," he said, his rhythm completely slow, savoring his moment of power. "You can't spend your $8,000 pension on something so wasteful. You've spent too much on something so useless." My voice shook. I was shocked. I knew I had never spent more than $50 a week. I wanted to scream, "You're lying," but my throat was tight. 10 years of military service, 50 years of self-respect, now just a slander from my shameless son-in-law. He was accusing me of stealing my own money. He moved closer, slamming a document onto my old kitchen table. It was a transfer deed. "Speaking of waste, Dad can't drive anymore. His old Ford Ranger is just an insurance liability," Ryan announced. "Sign here. Transfer ownership to your grandson, Jason. We'll sell it and put the money into his education savings." The truck. It was the last memory I had, besides the toolbox. I'd driven all over New England with Sarah in it. I tried to pick up my pen, but my hands were shaking too much. I shook my head. "No, this truck is mine. I won't sign." Ryan took a deep breath, adjusting the collar of his designer shirt. He stood tall, taller than me, looking me straight in the eye as if I were an insect. "If you don't sign, Bob, we're going to file for guardianship. You're showing signs of dementia, mental illness. You're spending money on unnecessary things, and you're endangering yourself." I looked at the papers. Tears welled up in my eyes. The truck was my last memory. Now they wanted to turn me into a crazy old man, someone who couldn't make his own decisions. I'd been framed as a silent thief. Now they wanted to turn me into a crazy old man. 3 days later, the final break happened. A cold man, claiming to be Ryan's lawyer, without even looking me in the eye, handed me an eviction notice. He said that this rental house, where I lived for the last years of Sarah's life, had been transferred by Ryan to a trust for my grandchild. It was all a legal maneuver, a brutal arrangement. I couldn't resist. I had to pack my belongings. It was ridiculous. All the belongings of a veteran, a hard-working craftsman all his life, fit into a worn suitcase of old clothes and a rusty toolbox. I stood in the middle of the empty room, a wave of pain and shame rising in my throat. I had been a breadwinner. I had made enough money to take Sarah to Florida every winter. In a monologue. At 62, I find myself homeless, penniless, and without honor. I'm a veteran, but now I'm trash, a useless mechanic thrown out on the street by his kids. This despair, it's colder than the snow outside. I used my last $50, my allowance for the week, to rent a shabby room at a Motel 6 on Route 7. It's a cheap chain motel, a symbol of the temporary defeat of the American poor. The room smelled strongly of bleach, trying to mask the smell of mold and stale cigarettes. My meal was a pack of instant noodles and tap water. I stared at the food, wondering where the $8,000 was. That afternoon, the villain's hypocrisy reappeared. My phone rang. It was Ryan. "Dad, I've booked a nice room for you at the nursing home," he said, his voice full of false concern. "It has full care. All you have to do is sign the guardianship papers. You'll be safe and well taken care of." I knew it was a trap. It wasn't care. It was a way to lock me up, to shut me up forever, and legally take everything away. I didn't answer. I hung up. I sat down on the flattened mattress and looked into the toolbox. I opened it. Inside, among the old wrenches and screwdrivers, I found a strange object. It was a small, faded leather-bound notebook that I had never noticed before. Sarah's secret notebook. I started to cry, not from humiliation, but from the last connection to my late wife. My tears fell onto the cover. But when I turned the first page of the notebook, I stopped. Sarah's handwriting, direct and decisive. "If anything happens to you, Bob, anything that makes you doubt, go to Elena." Elena? Who was she? I had never heard the name. And finally, I had a question. Something was wrong with my pension. Something was wrong with the way I was being treated. I had a name, and that was all I needed to start. I left the Motel 6, armed with the mysterious key and a sense of desperation. I knew I couldn't fight Ryan, a financial advisor protected by lawyers and money, with words alone. I needed a legal weapon. I walked the snow-covered 2 miles to the town's public library. There, amid rows of worn-out bookshelves and the distinct smell of paper towels, I could use a public computer. I typed Elena and Sarah's town into Google. I found her. Attorney Elena Rodriguez, formerly a prominent public defender, now retired, defending the local poor. Her address was a small, shabby office with no flashy sign, about 10 miles away in a neighboring town. I took the bus. I went to Elena's office. She was an older Hispanic woman with neatly coiffed grey hair and a sharp gaze, not at all friendly. She invited me to sit on a worn leather chair. I told her the whole story. The $8,000 pension control, the mental illness accusation, and the betrayal of my daughter. She listened, tapping her pen on the table. A disappointing encounter. After I finished, Eleanor spoke bluntly, her voice devoid of emotion, just the stark reality of American law. Mr. Bob, I'm sorry. Your story is very emotional, but I'm not a therapist. I'm a lawyer. Then she threw cold water on me. You want me to sue your daughter and her financial advisor's son-in-law? You want me to help you regain control of $8,000 a month? I won't do it for free. And you don't have any money for legal fees. You have no proof other than the word of a man whose family just filed a lawsuit for incapacity. I felt utterly hopeless. I forgot that, in this world, the truth isn't free. My pension was enough to pay, but I couldn't touch it. The truth was locked away by the very rules that were supposed to protect it. A glimmer of hope suddenly appeared. I shakily took out Sarah's old leather-bound notebook. Here, Sarah wrote your name. You're Sarah's friend, right? Eleanor took the notebook, looked at Sarah's handwriting. Her hard gaze softened a little, a fleeting emotion of an old friend. Okay, Bob, she sighed. For Sarah's sake, I'll look at your case pro bono. But you have to understand, in a court of law, emotions don't count. I need the slightest bit of physical evidence that Ryan committed financial fraud, not just gross negligence. You have to find the evidence of his crimes. Elena was no angel. She was a retired public defender who believed only in black and white. She gave me a mission: prove that taking my pension was a crime, not just negligence. I had no clue. I had no money. But at least I had a name, a reluctant ally to fight with. I returned to the shabby Motel 6 room. Elena's words were still ringing in my ears. Physical evidence of the crime. I had no computer, no money to hire a detective, only the experience of a mechanic with 62 years of life and Sarah's notebook. I began to analyze my memories. I wondered, what was the most absurd thing about Ryan's life? I remembered. Ryan had always been calculatingly poor. 2 years ago, he had complained to Sarah about almost losing his house because he couldn't pay the mortgage. He always emphasized saving, always wore slightly worn shirts. But then I remembered the watch, the Rolex Submariner, a stainless steel diving watch, a symbol of wealth and success in America. Ryan had always been proud of it, said he had bought it with a large bonus from his financial consulting firm. He was ridiculously boastful. The Rolex. That was an absurd detail. I pulled out my old phone and started scrolling through Ryan's public Facebook profile. He was the kind of guy who liked to brag. I found the photo, Ryan standing by the pool, wearing that watch, smiling smugly. The date was last November. I froze. He'd started taking control of my $8,000 pension last October. October, November. Was there a coincidence? My curiosity led me to Sarah's notebook. I flipped through the pages of recipes, shopping lists. Then I saw a different page, the handwriting small and careful, as if she'd deliberately hidden it. It was a note about an emergency savings account and a strange number, not a phone number, but what looked like a bank account number. The next line, written in blue ink. To Bob, "Don't let Ryan know about this fund. He's too ambitious." My heart pounded. Sarah, my late wife, had seen Ryan for what he was. "I'm not Sherlock Holmes. I'm just a retired mechanic. I don't know much about financial transactions or the law, but I know a motive when I see one. That Rolex wasn't the product of my labor. It was something I bought with my pain." I closed the notebook, feeling like I was holding a time bomb. I put it back in my toolbox, like a hidden secret, along with the mysterious key. I stood up, my back still aching but my mind clear. I had stopped being a victim. I had started being a hunter. I had found the first piece of the puzzle. Now, I needed to find the other pieces to prove that the watch was bought with my retirement money and that Ryan was a fraud. After meeting Elena, I understood that her kindness had its limits. I needed money to fight money. I returned to Sarah's notebook, the only thing I could fully trust. Eleanor showed me how to file a subpoena request, a standard legal procedure in the US, but it was slow and would surely be vehemently opposed by Ryan and Heather. I couldn't wait. I focused on the strange number Sarah had written down. I took it to the community bank in the neighboring town where Sarah often kept her small savings. "Yes, this is the account number of an informal trust fund," the teller said. "The beneficiary is Mr. Bob Miller. The trustee is Ms. Heather Miller." It was the emergency savings fund that Sarah didn't want Ryan to know about. It was set up to cover my unforeseen medical expenses. Although Heather was the custodian, since I was the sole beneficiary and Sarah had made a special provision for self-care expenses, I had access to a small amount. A glimmer of hope. The fund had nearly $15,000. I decided to act quickly. I went to the teller, my palms sweating. I asked for $5,000 in cash. $5,000. It was the first time in months that I had held a large sum of money in my hands. The Federal Reserve notes were green and heavy. $5,000, I whispered. It was Sarah's hard-earned money, saved from the sales of her chocolate chip cookies. It was my ticket out of hell, to buy back the truth. A silent blow. I knew I was doing what Ryan hated most, being financially independent. That $5,000 was my first shot at hiring a private investigator. But I was naive. Less than an hour after I left the bank, my phone rang. It was an automated message from the bank. "Unusual activity alert for Miller Trust. Please verify." Ryan, as the supervisor, also received the message. He immediately knew I was doing something. I had broken his rules. He was coming for me. That night, I didn't sleep well. I lay on the hard bed of the Motel 6, clutching the $5,000 in cash and the toolbox. He would come. He would be angry. But that $5,000 was my first shot. Now the real battle began. I knew he was coming. The $5,000 withdrawal notice from Sarah's small trust fund was like a siren in Ryan's ears. But I didn't think he'd arrive so quickly. His big, expensive black Cadillac Escalade pulled up in front of my shabby Motel 6. It was overwhelming, a wordless declaration of war. He walked in, not angry. Ryan was a failed financial advisor, and he loved to fight with his mind. "Dad," he said, his voice soft, even falsely concerned. "What are you doing? You're ruining my future." It was classic gaslighting. Ryan wouldn't admit his mistake, but accused me of endangering others. He sat down on the dirty plastic chair, crossed his legs, and said, "I'm just helping you save money, you know. Give me that $5,000, and you'll be transferred to the best nursing home, with your own room and a nurse." He was luring me into a guardianship trap. But this time, I didn't flinch. The simmering rage inside me was stronger than the fear. I looked straight into his smug eyes, at the shiny Rolex on my wrist. "Your Rolex," I said, my voice hoarse but firm. "You bought it with my money, didn't you? You took a veteran's pension to buy jewelry to show off, Ryan." He laughed. A long, ridiculous, disgusting laugh, designed solely to embarrass me. "Rolex? You're talking in your sleep again, Bob," he said, as if talking to a child. Dad's stressed, his back's affecting his brain. He pulled out his iPhone, scrolled quickly and dialed. He called right in front of me, not hiding anything. "Hello, Dr. Smith," Ryan said sweetly. "Yes, it's Ryan. I need an emergency psychiatric evaluation for my father-in-law, Robert Miller. Yes, he's having financial delusions and unstable spending habits. Tomorrow, okay? I understood. If I was declared incompetent, all my investigation efforts would be ruined. The court would declare Ryan legal guardian. I would be locked up, drugged, and my word would be worthless. Ryan hung up, looking at me triumphantly. Do you understand what that means, Dad? The court will declare you incapacitated, and I will have full custody. The $8,000, Sarah's house, and that old toolbox. I had 24 hours. If I didn't act, if I didn't escape, I would be locked up, drugged, and Ryan would take it all. My trust in my daughter was dead, and the truth was becoming a burden I didn't know what to do with. I looked into the dim, dirty mirror in the Motel 6 bathroom. The reflection was a gaunt, defeated old man, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep and despair. 24 hours. That was all I had before Ryan turned me into a legal madman. I remembered the promise I made to Sarah. Years ago, when I was in an accident and lying in a hospital bed, she held my hand tightly. Never let anyone look down on you, Bob. You're a good person and there are limits to kindness. That was the defining moment. I couldn't run away. I had to fight back. The internal transformation began with a cold plan. I used $5,000 in cash as a business strategy. I walked to the nearest Walmart. I bought a cheap prepaid smartphone just for communication and research. More importantly, I bought a small digital recorder. I couldn't let Ryan get the better of me with words anymore. I started acting like a detective, like a former mechanic trying to figure out what was wrong with a broken system. I called Elena. My voice no longer trembled. It was firm, steel wrapped in velvet. Elena, Ryan has arranged a psychiatric examination for me tomorrow. I need a legal tool to protect myself. Elena understood the danger. She quickly instructed me. Bob, you need to prove your sanity to the court. Go to a stationery store that has a notary public. I did. I photocopied all the important pages from Sarah's notebook. I wrote an affidavit before a notary, clearly stating the whole situation, and requesting that a guardian ad litem be appointed to represent my interests before the psychiatric examination took place. It was a reasonable legal deterrent. I've lived 62 years, I told myself. I can't let a greedy kid, who only knows Rolexes and Cadillac Escalades, turn me into a madman for my own retirement. Tragedy often begins with the fact that kindness has no boundaries. I understood that the revenge of good people is not emotional, but a logical plan, based on evidence and law. I would win with intelligence, not violence. I packed everything, not forgetting the rusty toolbox. I used the remaining money to buy a long-distance bus ticket. Boston. I can't investigate in Vermont. Ryan has everything under control here. I need a bigger city, where I'm just a shadow, where I can work quietly without him finding me. Boston. I came here to find the truth. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? I arrived in Boston, a big, unfamiliar city. I rented a small room, $50 a night, using the little money left from Sarah's trust fund. Here, I was just a shadow, which kept me hidden from Ryan's eyes. I began my investigation in a more professional way. Ryan couldn't manipulate me with words, but I needed ironclad evidence to use against him in court. I thought of Sarah. My wife is obsessively careful. She always backed up everything. I flipped through my notebook. I found a small note about the password to Sarah's old email account, an account I was sure Ryan didn't know. I used my hastily purchased prepaid smartphone, P8, to log in. Thousands of old emails appeared on the screen, letters from 5-10 years ago. I had spent the night reading, my eyes tired, my back aching, but I couldn't stop. I was flipping through Sarah's life, looking for something she wanted me to find. Dead end. Most of the emails were just harmless advertisements or family letters. I was near despair, on the verge of collapsing in frustration. I see a sore knee and an empty head. Sarah, where are you hiding something? And then I saw it. An email sent to Sarah 3 years ago from a friend named Chester. Small discovery, but shocking. The email's subject line was simple. About that Ryan. The email, written in a warning tone, was a revelation of my son-in-law's true nature. Chester, whom I knew as a wealthy former engineer, wrote that Ryan is a wolf in financial guise, Sarah. He made me lose all my money in a Florida real estate investment. I lost everything. Don't let him hurt Bob. This wasn't just greed. This was fraud. There was evidence of his criminal nature, clearly documented. I immediately emailed this to Eleanor. Hope rose in me. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Her voice was tense. Bob, Ryan just sent a notice to the bank. He's asking for a complete freeze on your emergency trust. He claims you used $5,000 for unreasonable and fraudulent purposes. If you don't return it, the court might grant his request. I was stunned. I had found evidence of Ryan's true nature, Chester's email. But immediately, my money was frozen again. Ryan didn't just control my $8,000 pension. He controlled my every financial move. He was backing me up against the wall, leaving me penniless in this strange city. I had the evidence, but I had lost the resources to use it. Trouble piled on trouble. The bank freeze left me penniless, but I had a name, Chester. I called Chester, the man who had sent Sarah the warning email 3 years earlier. I told him about Ryan, about my $8,000 pension, and about this fight for dignity. I didn't expect much. To my surprise, Chester agreed to meet me. He was a wealthy former engineer, living in a well-to-do neighborhood in the Boston suburbs. A man of the class Ryan coveted, but whom Ryan had duped. We met at a crowded Starbucks near downtown. Chester was a gentle old man, but his eyes were filled with pent-up anger. That Ryan Thorne, Chester said, his voice low and full of hatred. I warned Sarah. He's a viper. He cost me most of my savings on a bad real estate investment. An unexpected ally had appeared. He was not only sympathetic, but also a direct victim of Ryan. Chester explained, Ryan had illegally used insider trading information in that investment, tricking Chester into signing a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, so he couldn't tell anyone. Ryan got away with it, and Chester lost everything. I have the trading records, Bob, Chester said, pushing his latte aside. Ryan made me sign an NDA, but I have nothing left to lose. He took my dignity. I want to see him punished. Ultimate hope. Chester opened an old handbag and handed me a small USB drive. His Rolex? I have records that he used the money from that sale to buy it and pay off part of his mortgage. This is hard evidence, Bob. This is real crime. I felt like I'd been handed the keys to a vault, a small sense of victory, a momentary relief. But then, that peace was shattered. As we stood up, preparing to leave, Chester suddenly frowned and looked out the Starbucks window. Is that black Cadillac Escalade? He asked, his voice trembling. I glanced. A shiny black car drove by. The passenger window rolled down. I saw a face I didn't recognize, but he looked straight at me. It was Ryan's man. He'd been monitoring my bank transactions, knew I was in Boston, and sent someone to verify. I held the USB drive tightly in my jacket pocket. It weighed heavily in my hands, not of metal, but of truth and justice, compressed by 2 old men. As I walked out the door, I saw that black car returning. He knew I had something, and I had just put Chester, my only unlikely ally, in danger. Difficulties piled on difficulties. Chester's help had brought proof, but also alarmed the enemy. I went to Elena's office, who still had a cold demeanor, but her eyes were full of excitement. I handed her the USB drive Chester had given me, evidence of Ryan's illegal financial dealings. The legal action was quick. Elena plugged the USB drive into her computer. She flipped through the files, the transaction records, the internal emails about real estate investments in Florida. Her face tensed and then relaxed. Bob, Eleanor said, her voice tinged with excitement. This is ironclad evidence. We can sue Ryan for financial fraud and insider information. This isn't just abuse of guardianship, this is organized crime. We have a basis to regain control of his pension and even reclaim his honor. We began drafting the lawsuit. My hope was stronger than ever. I had gone from an old man being evicted from his home to someone about to expose his son-in-law's financial crimes. But the rule of this war was, No small victories. Elena's phone rang. It was Chester. His voice on speakerphone was shaky and full of panic. "Bob, I'm sorry. They know. Ryan sent someone to my house. He said I violated my NDA and will sue me for defamation and perjury. They took the original USB drive. I had to withdraw. I can't testify. Don't contact me again." Pain num 9. I was stunned, frozen, an ally betrayed, or worse, threatened and forced to withdraw. Elena quickly checked the hard drive. She had managed to copy the data from Chester's USB drive to her computer. But that comfort was fragile. I looked at the copied USB drive, now meaningless. Chester was my hope. He was a living witness. Now what? We had evidence but no witnesses. Ryan had our weakness. He knew Chester would never go to trial. I hung my head. I had put a friend in danger, and in return, I had only an unauthenticated copy. Restoring my honor seemed further away than ever. Ryan won this round, I told myself. He knew I couldn't use evidence that the main witness had publicly rejected. I lost $5,000, my peace of mind, and almost my freedom. I realized that fighting Ryan wasn't just about the truth. It was about fighting a carefully constructed system of fraud. He had anticipated every move I made. After Chester withdrew, we were at a stalemate again. My USB drive was useless, but Elena was a seasoned lawyer. She wouldn't give up easily. She said, "Bob, if we can't hit Ryan with external fraud, we'll hit him with family law." Deep investigation. Elena began digging into Ryan and Heather's marriage and property records. She looked for any signs of financial instability between the couple. American law is very transparent about this public record. She discovered that Heather was the one on the list of a huge debt which arose from a failed investment deal Ryan had gotten into 2 years ago. It was a personal debt, unrelated to their joint assets. Eleanor sat down, placed a file of documents in front of me, and pointed to a document. She said, "This is something I didn't expect, Bob. We were wrong about the hidden enemy." The evidence Elena found was my pension administration application. It was my daughter, Heather, who initiated the application and signed the application for custody of my account, 3 weeks before Ryan even offered to help me. Ryan was just the operator, the financial manipulator behind the scenes. Heather was the initiator and the direct beneficiary of my $8,000 pension, using it to pay off that huge personal debt. I always thought Ryan was the boss, a greedy demon who manipulated my daughter. I thought my daughter was just a victim of coercion, taken advantage of by her financial advisor husband. But the truth is, Heather was the real mastermind. Ryan was just her financial tool. The feeling of collapse was even greater than when I was kicked out of the house. My tears had long since dried up, but now, a cold, sharp pain stabbed straight into my heart. I fell apart. Not because of Ryan, but because of my daughter, my own flesh and blood. She wasn't forced. She was the ringleader. The naked truth. Heather's motives were more than just money. They were more complicated and cruel. She had always been deeply jealous of the close relationship between Sarah, her mother, and I. She felt abandoned, overshadowed. Controlling my pension was her way of asserting her power, an unconscious revenge against her parents. Elena placed the file in front of me. "Bob, you have to face the truth. The enemy is the person you gave life to. She didn't just take money, she took the last of your trust." I closed my eyes. My tears had dried. I was no longer fighting for money. I was fighting for why my daughter could betray me so cruelly. That was the only question left in my life. After the shock of my daughter's betrayal, Elena and I decided to act immediately. Emotions were gone, leaving only the coldness of someone seeking justice. Although the evidence of Ryan's external fraud, the copied USB, was weak, Heather's financial records and debts were evidence of her motives. Lawsuit. Based on Heather's records and the USB copy, Eleanor filed a lawsuit in the district court, demanding the right to administer the assets and alleging financial fraud in her role as trustee of the trust. We used all our strength in the first attack, but Ryan and Heather were not amateurs. They had money, and they had good lawyers. Less than 48 hours after we filed the lawsuit, Ryan and Heather's lawyers filed a notice. Countersuit. They charged me with defamation for spreading false information about Ryan as a fraudster. They also charged me with public harassment for contacting Chester, who had publicly recanted, and causing unnecessary panic. Enemy weapon. In their countersuit, their attorneys presented evidence of Chester's recantation, who signed a statement claiming I had coerced him. Worse, they dug up my old medical records from the head injury I sustained in the accident. They used them to support their claim that I was delusional, incompetent, and were using litigation to cover it up. They weren't just attacking my evidence, they were attacking my intelligence. Bob was pushed back. I was facing arrest for harassment, a huge fine I couldn't afford, and a complete loss of all evidence. I was back to being an invisible man, but now a felon. Elena, with her vast experience as a public defender, had to use emergency motions to block the warrant for my immediate arrest. She fought fire with fire, but we were outnumbered in resources. I sat in Eleanor's small office, freezing. I had brought the truth to light, and in return, I was countersued. I had lost at the first door. They had made me the villain in my own story. They weren't fighting with evidence, they were fighting with their wealth and the legal system they controlled. And I, a former mechanic with $8,000 in pension money locked up, was crushed under the wheels of that justice. We entered the closed family hearing, mediation hearing. Under American law, this was a mandatory step in trying to settle a will and guardianship dispute out of court. It took place in a small, elegant conference room in the other side's law office, a stark contrast to Elena's old office. I sat across from Heather and Ryan. Ryan wore an expensive Hugo Boss suit, his Rolex gleaming in the conference room lights. Heather, my daughter, sat next to him, her expression cold and indifferent. I tried to contain my emotions, using the sharp words Elena had prepared. I pointed out the absurdity of their spending, Heather's debt, and the watch Ryan had bragged about. Ryan, with a smug, well-rehearsed look on his face, admitted to wearing a Rolex, but he said it was a gift from Heather. Evidence impaired. Yes, Justice of the Peace, Ryan said, his voice calm. My wife, Heather, gave me this watch for our 10th wedding anniversary. Bob's pension is irrelevant. Here's a legitimate gift receipt signed by her. He produced a stamped gift receipt. The judge turned to Heather. This should have been the moment my daughter broke down, the moment she admitted. But she looked at her father, unrepentant. She declared to the judge and the lawyers, "My father is obsessed. He's jealous of Ryan's success. I just want to protect my father's assets from him. He's not in his right mind, and my management is necessary." I tried to show a copy of Chester's USB drive and emails, but Ryan's lawyer cut me off immediately. Your Honor, these pieces of evidence have been declared forged and perjured by the key witness, Chester. We request that they be struck from the record. The truth was twisted, and I, Bob Miller, the veteran, was branded a liar, a haunted lunatic. The collapse. I couldn't stand my daughter's lies. She didn't just take my money. She killed my soul, my self-respect. All my pent-up emotions burst out. I wanted to scream, but Elena put her hand on mine, signaling me to keep quiet. The Justice of the Peace tapped his pen. In the absence of credible witnesses and the lack of evidence, the court will seriously consider Ms. Heather's request for temporary guardianship. I had lost. They were about to have legal guardianship of me and my assets. Difficulty piled on difficulty. I had no small victory. All the hope that had just been kindled was extinguished in an instant. The conciliation hearing ended. I was completely defeated. The court granted Heather and Ryan a temporary restraining order, recognizing their legal guardianship of me. Bob Miller, the veteran, was officially declared incapacitated. That afternoon I saw Elena for the last time. "Bob," she said, her voice tired and sad, "we're almost out of luck. This temporary restraining order is a crushing blow. You're responsible for legal fees. You're broke. There's nothing I can do, at least not right now." completely defeated. I returned to my room, alone. Difficulty on top of difficulty. Ryan and Heather didn't just want to win the case. They wanted to liquidate me, to remove me from their lives forever. I got the latest notice from their lawyer, a request to forcibly place me in a rundown nursing home, not to care for me but to isolate me and control me forever, a remote place where I would have no contact with the outside world. Silence me by locking me up. Utter despair. I sat in my cold, rented room with no money left to buy a hot meal. I had lost more than money. I had lost my daughter. I had lost my freedom. I was completely lost. I looked at the rusty toolbox, the only thing I had left, other than the clothes I was wearing. I missed Sarah. I missed her laugh, the smell of her apple pie. I was close to giving up. I had fought with my wits, with the truth, but all were crushed by Ryan's manipulation and power. Desperate act. In desperation, I opened the toolbox. I wasn't looking for a weapon. I was looking for something forgotten, something buried in my memory. I dug through the screwdrivers, the wrenches, and then my hand touched something cold metal. It was a small, old, brassy key. I'd always thought of it as Sarah's locker key, nothing more. I wiped away my tears. I held the key in my hand. It was small and insignificant. I flipped through Sarah's notebook again, to the last page. It was a worn page. I'd overlooked it many times. Sarah's handwriting appeared, not a note, but a final message. To Bob, use this key to open safe deposit box 12B at the First National Bank. It's not about the money, it's about the truth you need to know. Don't be afraid, Bob. All hope had fallen, except for this little key. Sarah had prepared something. This is my last move, a secret kept from my deceased wife. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? I called Elena. My voice was strangely calm, but my hand was still shaking as I held the old brass key. I told her about Sarah's last message and Safe 12B. Elena, after hearing about the utter failure of Part 15, decided to help me one last time, not for money, but out of the curiosity of a lawyer who refuses to be defeated. We went to the First National Bank in the next town, a large, reputable bank. I handed over the key and my ID. The key went into the lock, making a decisive click. There was no cash inside Safe 12B. There were only 2 items, a handwritten letter from Sarah and a small white USB stick. I opened the letter. Sarah's handwriting was familiar, but the content was cold and frighteningly intelligent. Sarah knew. She had recognized Heather and Ryan's greed even when she was still alive. The letter explained, "You are not a burden, Bob. You are my peace. I have set up an irrevocable trust for you, with a special provision. If Heather attempts to seek guardianship, she will lose her right to be a beneficiary of all the other assets in my will, and the management of your pension will automatically transfer to attorney Elena." Sarah wasn't just protecting me. She was setting the perfect trap. Elena shakily plugged the USB stick into her laptop. It was a self-made video of Sarah, recorded in her living room. Sarah's voice rang out, clear and firm. "Ryan and Heather are lying. Bob's $8,000 monthly pension was transferred to another secret, secure account I set up. Everything they've been managing and arguing about all this time is just a ghost account that I prepared for them to focus their fraud on. Your real pension is still intact." Community payoff. Elena immediately used the video, the letter, and the terms of the irrevocable trust to file in the appeals court. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. Heather and Ryan were charged with conspiracy to defraud and forgery in court. They lost everything: the house, Sarah's will, and faced legal action. Ryan was stripped of his license by the Board of Financial Services. I didn't have to do anything. Justice is served by the very laws they try to manipulate: healing and restoration of honor. I was fully restored to my capacity and honor by the court. I regained control of my $8,000 month pension and inherited Sarah's cozy home. I looked at Heather, not with hatred, but with pity. I decided to let the law handle the consequences. I started a new life. I bought an old Ford truck and repaired it myself, restoring my dignity as a mechanic. I opened the rusty toolbox. I had built my happiness on sacrifice and boundless kindness. And now, I had finally learned to protect it with truth and the law. The little key, Sarah's last secret, opened not just a cabinet, but the peace I deserved. And it was, at last, peace. CTA Sympathy. If you also believe that the truth always has its own power, please register and share our story. Because silent justice sometimes just waits for a small clue.